Welcome back to another episode of Twisted Metal Companion. We have another interview, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Peter. Tyler is also joining with me. Hello, Tyler.
Hey, Peter.
All right. Well, this interview, I've been chomping at the bit, to schedule this one. I'm glad she was able to find a time that worked and carve us into her busy schedule. I want to take a little intro that I got from the show, so I kind of I didn't really put a spin on it because I can't give her anything but this. But she's a goddamn legend. She drives the sickest Beamer. She's the top selling real estate agent in Boca Raton. I think we'll discuss that city. A Remax Diamond Club member 10 years in a row. Kathy Stratton, but you guys know her as Granny Dread. Hey, Keith, how you doing?
Oh, I am just tickled to be here. I am so excited. The show was a great privilege, and talking about it is just a source of joy. So thanks for inviting me on.
Absolutely. We're gonna jump around a little bit, but this is gonna be about you, and I have questions just from looking at the things that you have done previously. But before we get into any of that, Twisted Metal or you, when the show did come out, what was going on with you? Because we were also, going through a writer strike and actor
Oh,
strike.
hmm
well, and I hope we'll talk about what made this show very special to me and actors like me. But it was, of course, we were in the midst of the writer's strike, and we could see the strike coming. I mean, it doesn't just fall on your head; it takes a while to arrive. And I was going, oh no, 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 no! The strike is going to start when I would otherwise be singing the tunes of Twisted Metal on all my social media and trying to get out there and help support the show. But as you know, when the strike happens, all of us have to go silent. Our job is and it's so antithetical to the way we are all brought up as actors to be collaborators in front of and behind the camera. So this idea that we were just going to clamp down and not say a word about work that we're very proud of, that's exactly what was happening. So a few weeks before, well, maybe a week before the strike started, I was sending out little posts saying things like, I can't mention what it is, but keep your eye out. And thanks, everybody. And then, so really now a lot of people are, as you guys know, probably still just gaining a sense that the show was going on, which has been kind of wonderful in a way because the delight of people discovering it is more extended. Versus, when you do something with Marvel, everybody knows, everybody's there. There's a lot of noise and it's very exciting. And then it goes away. This is like creeper weed. It just goes on and on and on. It's kind of marvelous and
Yeah,
rolling right into season two. So
yeah, absolutely. Creeper weed. I feel that's a strain Granny Dread would have Amber grow for her or something
she grows it
like
in the
it.
back of the convoy. She's
Yeah,
got
I
grow
believe so.
lights.
Yeah. I'm saying it now, like we see is it a Tyler, who releases The Walking Dead? AMC?
yeah, AMC.
Yeah. There's so many spin-offs off of the original The Walking Dead. Why can't we get Twisted Metal Granny Dread? Like when she's Kathy Stratton, she's got stories. We'll get there, and that's
From
gonna
your
be a cheat.
mouth, my friend, to MJ's ears. That's all I say. Let it be so.
Yeah, I would love it. Just that character. Okay. Before we get into it, because we're gonna gush and not learn anything about you. Um, you've done a lot of different things, theater. I mean, writing. The one that stood out, just kind of looking through your website. You're a aviation historian.
Isn't that weird? Well, here's
No,
the thing. I my background, my educational background was a liberal arts degree. So I didn't go to a fine arts program. I went to liberal arts where you have to read across the whole curriculum, go deep in some areas. And so the objective of that kind of education is to create a student who stays hungry, always curious, always exploring, looking for great opportunities to succeed and even greater opportunities to fail meaningfully. That's what the liberal arts train you for. So it teaches you to communicate essentially. And I've trust me, I am so grateful because it has supported all of my arts life habits. I work very often as a teacher and also as a writer, and I do primarily interpretive writing. So I was hired to write the audio tour for the world's largest privately held collection of antique airplanes. Is a place in Florida called Fantasy of Flight. And if we put that, if we do like a Fantasy of Flight link on this, trust me, every remaining World War II pilot in America will listen to this podcast. Not that that's the audience that you're seeking, but so anyway, I did that, and then I ended up becoming essentially the entertainment department for this collection, which was also sort of a well, it was a museum, but it was more than a museum. It was about experiences and stuff. So just had the best time. But I accidentally became uh, an aviation historian from original fixed wing aircraft up through Korea. After that, I don't know anything. I know a few jets, but I'm really good at World War One and World War Two.
I'm always
Was
fascinated
that the
by.
answer you were expecting?
No, it's a great answer.
Yeah, that's
Like
awesome.
always, yeah. I've always been fascinated with like the mysteries of history, just big events. As an aviation historian, what are your thoughts on Amelia Earhart and what happened?
Oh, there were an awful lot of great pilots during that period of time. She was really extraordinary, and her partner, Fred Gandy, I think was his name, who the two of them did such significant work. But there are other great ones too, like Beryl Markham, and then all of these wonderful female pilots that flew in World War II for Russia, the Night Witches, and the ones that were delivering aircraft across the United States, flying everything from a B-17 to a P-51, amazing female pilots. And I have to say that I think Amelia Earhart really stood as an inspiration for a lot of women to step into airplanes. Now, there were female pilots before her, but the mystery of what became of her is a fascination. Probably, I don't know if people would be as nearly as caught up in that if it had been a man.
Hmm,
And she already was challenging a lot of conceptions of what the right thing for a young woman to be doing with her time, and I guess her gasoline, her petroleum.
right.
you
Oh,
know
yeah.
so it's but people spend, I guess they're still spending millions of dollars to scan those seas out there and
Yeah,
looking for bits and pieces. And didn't they just find somebody, just and you get these declarations, we found it, we know what
right.
happened, the whole story, her brassiere strap washed up on my atoll. Atoll.
I think
It's
yeah, earlier this year there was like a sonar expedition of sorts, and I believe what they saw, they couldn't tell if it was a plane or rocks, but it was the shape of a plane, and what appeared to be the wings wasn't quite the design of what she flew. So that was the last
mm,
thing, yeah, that was put out there. And I
because
think
she was flying an
something
Electra, I think, wasn't she?
that I'm not
Yeah,
sure
I
of.
think so.
Yeah, but I think just the fact that there are no evidence of any sort out there, that's why it's such a interesting mystery.
Well, it's interesting too when you think about downed planes, especially downed in the sea. Those are essentially grave sites now,
Mm.
and it's the same with, like, I did some work with submarines too. I mean, live long enough, you'll eventually do everything. But the idea that that is now a holy place, a life evaporated in that place. And in some ways, it should be held that way. I know that they're the Navy, particularly the flying forces of the Navy, are very, very touchy about people doing any kind of excavation or reclamation of downed airplanes because of that very reason. And so I don't know, but it would be interesting to know where it happened. And
Absolutely. Just like the Titanic.
I love the collective fascination with it too. It's
Yeah.
marvelous.
Yeah, it's really great. You mentioned getting into like you said liberal arts writing. What was it?
Well, my degree was a liberal arts, a BA, and then I
Okay.
did an MA afterwards. So that was more theater oriented. But yeah, I've made most of my income in my life teaching and writing.
Was that something you wanted to do when you were a lot younger? Was there an inspiration to get into writing?
I do a kind of special writing. It's interpretive writing. I'm not a fiction writer, and gosh, do I admire these people who develop stories out of whole cloth. They devise a character. Now, I actually teach writing of this sort, but I don't actually do it. What I do is take an object and experience, and then I try to elucidate and illuminate it for an audience. It's a little bit like acting with a script. So, if, for example, I do a lot of writing for the National Park Service, where in particular I do interpretive writing where I will interpret what people are seeing and provide the historical context and stuff. But I do an awful lot of disability related writing. So audio description for the blind, where my writing is to mimic the experience of a blind person encountering this natural phenomenon, maybe even just a visitor center, and to tell them with in a way that really articulates the spirit of the experience,
Hmm.
but in a way where my ego shows up not at all. So the idea is that I'm like a ghost that's walking at their elbow, and telling them what they're seeing literally, and at the same time capturing the spirit. So you have to work both literally and kind of spiritually at the same time in this kind of writing, but be absolutely not no ego at all. There's no look at how clever I am, or shall I ask an interesting question, so that we can have a dialogue. There's none of that. It's really just about, wow, this is the experience a sighted person is having right now. And I want to recreate that experience for you without sight. So I do a lot of that. And I'd never even heard of such a thing. I love it. It's Zen writing, if anything,
Mm.
because you have to go no ego, and yet you've got to tell the truth, and you have to be absolutely present in this moment, in this place, as somebody else's eyes.
Oh, that's interesting. And what about the formative part of like the acting, theater? When did you catch
Mm.
that bug?
Um, I think probably, and this is going to be a familiar story, a lot of actors are kind of shy people. Has anybody else mentioned this
I've
to
heard.
you?
Yeah.
We are shy. Now I can do anything in front of a camera, I can do anything on stage, but like a cocktail party is to me the scariest experience of all. And so I think a lot of people, including me, reached into the world of theater to have a way to enter society. And I don't mean like society, but I mean like, the world, the culture, and to find a way to work by working collaboratively with other people in pursuit of a single goal. It's a way for us to participate. Um, so I think that's what happened. I was 11. I auditioned for a role in The Sound of Music. I won the very important role of little tiny nun number 5, and I sang in Latin, and it was like the world cracked open. I thought, I'm here with these people, we're doing this thing, and we're touching these other people. And so yeah, it has been this through line of my whole life is doing that. And in some ways it's kind of similar to the writing that I was talking about, because there's no room for Peg on stage, only Peg as she's filtering Little Nun number 5, or Peg as she's filtering Martha from Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, or Peg as she's filtering Granny Dread. And so for those of us who are shy, it's a way to work out our place in the world.
Yeah, I can see that. And I've had I've reached out to some people who just can't speak behind a microphone, So
Hmm.
yeah, yeah, that is interesting. I think Tyler has a question for one of your earlier credits. 'Cause that's
Oh
why I was
yeah.
kind of asking like how you do when I got into acting.
Yeah. Going through IMDb, which can be kind of spotty in the accuracy of placements, it has Curse of the Blair Witch, your narration on that as the very first thing. So first,
Uh-huh.
is that accurate? Should that be listed as first, or and then if you have any stories about working with that production?
Yeah, I have a lot of stories about working with that production. Haxon Films, the Blair Witch Lads, um, are all from Orlando, Florida, or were attending University of Central Florida back then. And there is a shout out to one of my favorite arts institutions, a small art cinema in Central Florida called Enzion. And they also produce the Florida Film Festival. Call me when you submit. At any rate, they bunch of the Haxon guys were all working at Enzion at the time, as was I. As a matter of fact, Mike Manello was living in my guest bedroom as they were starting to put together Blair Witch. I just did a voiceover for Ed and Greg's new podcast
Hmm.
and stuff like that. So, yeah, so I have known them since we were all pups. As a matter of fact, I was at Sundance the same year. I was there as Florida Film Festival, and they were there as Blair Witch. It was a very exciting time to be there and be friends of theirs. So, in the original Blair Witch project, and there were, however many different edits of it, there was a narrator,
Hmm.
and that was me.
Mm-hmm.
And then they cut all the narration out. And we, by the way, they were so poor. This is a good story. They were really putting together nickels and dimes because these were college guys just recently out of college. They were well supported and well loved by their community, but they're producing a film. So they didn't have a lot of money. And when we taped that narration, I was sitting in a small closet speaking in a microphone through a coat hanger that had a piece of pantyhose over it. That's how poor. No, I wasn't paid because I was their chum. So, but then all the narration got cut. Crunch, crunch, crunch. More crunchy leaves. More crunchy leaves. More crunchy leaves. And then the movie came out. And then the Curse of the Blair Witch is the Sci-Fi Channel special
Mm-hmm.
that came out, and they restored all of that narration
Okay.
into that special. However, I had to retape it, and so Ed calls me and he's like, "Send me an invoice." I'm like, "Are you kidding? An invoice? You betcha!" And I had to go out and like get an invoice format and everything, and typed it up and sent it. And it was the most money I've ever made legally, at that point in my life. And so like go to a studio and there's like Ed sitting in the captain's chair like James T. Kirk, and I go into a booth. Oh my heavens, looky, look. And we taped it. We all just giggled and howled because they had, buckets of money to spend. And it was a thrilling, thrilling time. So yeah, I'd narrate and then I do some weird voice stuff in that too. But yeah, I am so proud being a witness to that work when it all unfolded. And I mean, from the very moment from before it happened, when they were like sitting around and just talking about it, I was in and out of the room, and I'm like, wow, brush with greatness, much.
Yeah, it's quite a history. Like that movie. Just a lot of people go back to that of film being not underrated because it was so huge, but people kind of forget, and then they go back and rewatch it, and it still holds up. It's a
Well,
lot of
and it was
people's
the whole experience too.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
The marketing of the film, the question of is this real or not? I mean, people were having very lively conversations about whether these three kids were really lost in the woods, or if this was all people had not really engineered that kind of hijinks and then create. This is where Manello. I don't know if you guys know Mike Manello, but he was the guy who put together the whole marketing, and he's one of the original four, then five when Callie came on, of the Haxon guys. Manello developed that whole marketing campaign of, of the marketing being about questions, not about, it was all about question marks, not about exclamation points. And that led people into a merry question about what they were seeing. And
It was
they're having big anniversaries now too. I saw that a bunch of folks were walking out into the woods with Matt this past weekend on a Blair Witch experience in Maryland.
that's wild. It really went viral before viral was a thing. We
Mhm.
didn't have social media, but it blew up. I was working. I'm trying to yeah, I was working at Block. No, movie theater. I'm forgetting my own timeline now, but that came out around the time I was either working at the theater. Maybe that's what it was. I think I was
1999, I think,
yeah, movie
is
theater.
was the
Yeah,
year. Yeah.
because Phantom Menace was also out. I kind of remember that. And so it was huge. And then I would go on to work at Blockbuster and it was continue like it was off the shelves, and we never had anything in stock. Um,
I'm so
Yeah,
proud of them.
I
Huge
remember
deal.
I think I was probably 10 at the time, and I remember my sister like debating, whether she was like, do I actually want to go see this? Can I make it through? Yeah, it's a big event.
Well, and so the idea of a film that was genuinely collaborative, I mean, an awful lot of that, it was set up to evolve the way it did, but so much responsibility on those actors and so much the requirement of them e- experiencing. I mean, they were out in those woods by themselves with a couple of cameras late at night with Ben Rock shaking trees over them. How terrifying.
Yeah, I would have. There's probably some footage that I still haven't seen in terms of like the behind the scenes of the making of. That was the stuff I was eating up, the supplemental material coming off of DVDs. And I don't remember what was featured on that specific DVD release, but I believe it was probably one of the earlier DVDs too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it would have been pretty well. Yeah, because I think Blockbuster was giving out VHS at that point.
Still, they still work because
Yeah.
Titanic was still two tapes.
Now
Sixth
I'll
Sense
tell
was a
you
new
though,
DVD.
there is a new edition of Blair Witch out now that is supposedly corrected a lot of the. They didn't probably invest as much in the production of the original DVD. I'm not talking about Hacks, and I'm now talking about the distributors. Um, so they Haxon now has created and is putting out the ultimate super clean. You're not going to miss a single leaf being stepped on, and there's a lot of leaves get stepped on in that show.
Sure,
But
absolutely.
it's beautiful. It really and it is. One of the themes at Enzion and the Florida Film Festival we lived by was the notion that film is art. And it's easy for those of us who work in medium to recognize that, but a lot of people just think of it as a good time or whatever. All of the Haxon guys came out of a tradition that operated with filmmaking as an art form. And when you look at that film as an art form, it is unmistakably, it is beautifully precise. It is a gorgeous manipulation of the audience's spirit. It's a real achievement, independent of the fact that it was just this, crazy thing that came out of nowhere and knocked the world on its end.
Yeah.
uh,
Um,
and I can
yeah, go ahead.
confirm that that new release of Blair Witch does have the Curse of the Blair Witch on it. Uh,
Yeah, well, now run out. Let's just stop right here and I'll get one.
Let me just add that to my Amazon wish list real quick.
Featuring
Um,
Granny Dread.
yeah, really. To take a turn a little bit, just recently we lost an acting legend. I only just saw this in your reel before we all got on the camera here, but you previously worked with John Amos. I don't know how long ago and what the project was.
It was probably 3 or 4 years ago. It was an independent film produced in Central Florida called Because of Charlie. Charlie being a hurricane. So it's whenever we have a hurricane in the Southeast, John Benkowski, the creator of Because of Charlie, always sends out an alarm that says, "You guys need to watch Because of Charlie before the lights go out." And but John Amos was featured in that, and what a gent! What a gent! I really enjoyed that. So it would have been among his final works because I think John has probably been a little quiet in recent months. I mean, he did Coming to America 2 or Coming Back to America or whatever it
America
was called.
2, yeah.
Yeah, he did that since then. And I think maybe some other TV stuff. But yeah. And it's one of those things. I mean, I'm an actor, but every now and then you step into the room and there's like a star there, like somebody who's got that kind of charisma. And that was John Amos, even in his late days in a wheelchair. He still sparkled. I mean, and commanded a lot of attention. A great time.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Um, I think the next project here would be a good segue into Twisted Metal after that. But you mentioned Marvel a little bit earlier, but you were also in She-Hulk, and there's a bit of a connection. There's a Patty Guggenheim who was cast in season 2, was also had
Yeah.
a part there. Can you talk about your experience and kind of what was that like?
Well, I'll tell you a couple of things about it. I mean, entering the Marvel universe takes you to a different level of perception in the world. It's one of those things. It's like a mark you can never take off of you, nor would you ever want to. So even my relatively small but kind of strange and memorable, I think, role in She-Hulk, uh, whenever I encounter students, which I do now a lot, the first thing they want to know about was about Marvel. And they were shooting everything back in that day in Atlanta. And they had a studio outside of Atlanta that had, when I was there, 27 stages.
Mm,
And they were building more. And they did, I mean, it was like a cinema factory out there. It was massive. And the money they were spending was, I mean, because typically I do a lot of theater and there's always everything shoestring there. And even a lot of the film and TV stuff, everybody's very conscious of money. I have never seen such money spent in my life. Yes, it was during the high panic of COVID. And so there was constant testing going on. And the testing center was in the old fairgrounds in Atlanta, and you would drive through the tents. And a nice lady in what was like a hazmat suit would lean into your car and, shove things up your nose. And then you would go home. And if you had to test for 36 hours before you went on set. And so if you got delayed, you got another test. And there was a period of time where they were doing a bunch of delays because they were, doing the stack shooting kind of thing. And I was being delayed and delayed. But I would just drive into Atlanta and test and get $250 for testing. I was joking to my agent. I said, I'm paying my bills from COVID testing right now before I even got on set. If you were going in for a costume fitting, and I don't know if you've seen the thing, but you can probably tell my costume was really elaborate.
yeah,
And so I had lots and lots of costume fittings. I'm like, oh, great. I get do the fitting, but I also get to take a test. And it was nutsy, nutsy. And nobody in that show got sick. It
that's good.
was tight as a drum and very conscientious. The show itself was a blast. It was a lot of fun. And there's a certain, I guess, one of my one of the things I bring, and also one of the things that holds me back sometimes, is I tend to be a little more theatrical than a typical little old lady, and so that really allowed me to run free. I wish there was a big scene that I had with Megan the Stallion
Mhm.
where she gets in a fight and then the person she's fighting with turns into me. I'm not really Megan the Stallion. And so I got to hang out with Megan the Stallion all day, who, by the way, she and I are the same height. There's probably about 50 years that separate us, but aside from that, we're the same person. She was darling and funny, had a massive entourage with dogs and makeup artists and everything. All it was a blast. It was so much fun.
That episode was a lot of fun. Is it Runa? I kind of forget the pronunciation.
Runa, yep.
Yeah.
And there's a in the making of there's a whole segment about how I was cast.
The
And if
director
you go
talks
to my
about that. Yeah.
yeah, if you go to the IMDb thing, I think I pulled that out and featured that because it's really funny because they were looking for like a little elfin, pixie dream girl kind of thing, and they couldn't find it. So and then Kat Cora tells the story about how they ended up with me. And man, you talk about a dream come true. It was, and there was really no holds barred. There was never a moment where they said, "Oh, maybe you want to pull that performance in a little bit, Peg," which I sometimes hear.
Yeah. Runa's a
Never.
nuisance. She's a
Yeah,
nuisance, really. Yeah.
she really is. She's a overprivileged person from another place.
Oh.
And there's a Hero Clicks figure that is Runa. And I had no idea. Every now and then people, because it's not hard to find me. I mean, I publish my address. I get these things in the mail and somebody's taken a picture out of the web somewhere and asked me to autograph it. And I'm always so flattered, so happy to do that. And this one fella sends me this thing and I open it up and it's like this card that somebody had. I mean, it was really, well, I've got a couple of them around here somewhere. And I was like, well, what is this? And I went on it. Yeah, Hero Clicks. I'd never heard of it. Runa. And it's a game piece. And it's me. Where is it? Is there one nearby? They're all over the house now. So that Runa's looking at you all over. It's like the elf on the shelf,
Scary.
but so much weirder. Anyway,
Yeah. If there was even like a short of like the little Runa elf figurine or something, that could be a really scary short in itself. The all the little things that she could turn into toy soldiers, Toy
well, you
Story.
see, I suggested, oh, here. Oh gosh, that one is missing an arm. Let me get this one out. I just go on eBay and I buy them and then give them to my friends for as gifts. That's little Runa. And she's got all these. There's values on her of some kind. I don't know.
Yeah, a lot of room for making toys. The whole
Well,
Marvel universe.
and I said to the EP on the show, I said, you know what you need to do is you need to make a show called Runa Did It, where people get to do all the stuff they ever wanted to do on the screen, but would have been ashamed of doing, and then it turns into Runa Did It. And so you can get all the big stars to act out their acting nightmares and dreams, and then just blame Runa.
I think that's great. Yeah, it could be even just web series. Just all on the website. It's or even a TikTok challenge. Like Runa
Yeah,
did
I
it.
still got some ears
Yeah.
here somewhere I can put on.
Yeah, really. I like the idea of Runa hanging out with Megan Thee Stallion. And I feel Granny Dread could probably teach Megan Thee Stallion a few things too, from everything we learned about her. So that was my attempt at a segue into
Nice.
the Twisted Metal. Can you talk about booking that role? How did you come across it, and what were they looking for specifically? And actually, if you were even familiar with Twisted Metal, the video games.
No, I'm strange. I know it's going to be hard to imagine that I have not played a lot of video games in my life, although I've had a lot of students who played a lot. So it's not I didn't know anything about it. And I was auditioning at the same time for a feature that was about a serial killer and his mother who traveled. And so I was trying desperately to get this part of this mother. And I guess I did the Twisted Metal audition and I didn't forget about it. But when you're an actor, you're auditioning for everything that comes your way. And so I did the Twisted Metal thing, and then I'd gotten called back for this thing where I'd talk about eating pimento cheese. I just want the pimento cheese. And I was really into this part. And then I got a call from my agent that I'd booked. And I was like, oh, happy day. And I said, is it pimento cheese? And she's like, I don't know. She didn't. So I'm thinking I've gotten this pimento cheese part. And then it turns out, no, it's Twisted Metal, which is not, Pimento Cheese Man, if you're out there, what a great script. But I mean, what a huge deal to book something that was going to be with, Anthony Mackie, this whole with MJ and stuff like that. Lordy Lord. It was, so I was tickled to get Pimento Cheese. I was triple ecstatic to discover I hadn't gotten pimento cheese that which I eventually had to decline because I got Twisted Metal. And then you can imagine I'm a research person, so my research started. And I, I was very confused because I would read up on Granny Dread, and there wasn't a lot there. Although even I am still disappointed that I don't get to drive Hammerhead, which would have been fun. But and then can I tell you a side story that was
Oh,
Absolutely.
yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
that will articulate how little I knew? I was, and people are always the heroes of their own stories. So please let me just step back a little bit from my own, heroics here. But I was in the process of undergoing, being checked out to become a live organ donor for a friend of mine who was needing a kidney. And, I may be an old lady, but I'm a pretty healthy old lady. And so I'd volunteered. And this was before the audition, all of that. So I had been doing all these tests with local doctors and getting blood. And yeah, there was one time where I had to carry a gallon of urine around with me for 24 hours. Yeah, it's not an easy process, but it's worth it. Hey kids, sign up and donate organs. It's worth it. At any rate, there's a big thing that happens at the very end of all of these little tests where you go. I was being flown up to New York Presbyterian Hospital, which is in Manhattan, and to do what they called the $1 million workup. And it takes 2 days, and you see like five doctors. I swear this story will come back around. A kidney guy, a surgeon, you have to get a psychological evaluation, all of this stuff, and it's really complicated to schedule it. And so I put on my audition that I was not available these particular days. And everybody does that. You always flash when you're not, when you can't do something, but that doesn't mean that's not negotiable. So I get the call about booking Twisted Metal, and my agent says, but they need you on the days you're supposed to be at New York Press. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I'm thinking, I'm going to have to decline this. And my heart was breaking. And I thought, well, no, let me call. So when you do an organ donation, there are two parties. There is the recipient and the donor, and they keep them all separate. They go through entirely different processes, and they each have their own advocate. So the idea is if the donor decides, as they're rolling you into the operating room, I don't want to do this after all, they roll you right back out because you have that ability to say no. Anyway, so I had this advocate was this guy named Brian. I always called him Kidney Ninja, because he was just this really knowledgeable, funny guy and everything. And I was thinking, and he set up all of these doctors for me to see over these 2 days. I pick up the phone and I call him and I said, Brian Ninja, I got to tell you. And he knew I was an actor. He was all about the Marvel thing. As a matter of fact, that's was the final pitch on the kidney was Runa. But so I said, I have this opportunity. He's like, oh no, you're gonna. And I said, yeah, but it's for some kind of it's a TV show about a game. And he's like, well, what game? I said, have you ever heard of Twisted Metal? And he goes, Twisted Metal. The kidney ninja like lost his mind. Apparently, when he was in medical school, because he was an RN before he became an administrator of a donor facility, he that's how he got through medical college. Staying sane was playing Twisted Metal all the flipping time. So I said, "Yeah, Twisted Metal." He's like, "What part are you playing?" And of course, I'm only a little NDA'd at this point. I said, "Well, somebody called Granny Dread." Granny Dread, he goes. And, in 10 minutes, he had all of those doctors, all of New York Presbyterian, all of this atomic medicine I was going in and out, all the measurements of my, all of it rescheduled. So
That's
while
amazing.
I had no idea that what Twisted Metal or Granny Dread was, I soon knew that I was carrying a pretty big responsibility, at least to the kidney ninja, who was very important to me.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. I don't know if anybody will ever top that. But I played with, maybe the first couple versions of that. I was still young enough, and I guess like the driving games wasn't really up my alley, but I was familiar with it. Not the character of Granny Dread, so I was kind of learning like a lot of other people. But we did a season one recap after the show came out, and one of our guests, Gamer Jay Lee, he he's a lot of these characters, they're kind of just jokey and very silly and stuff. And
Yeah,
so
get out of
he
my
was,
yard.
yeah, it's just he was surprised that Granny Dread's character they would bring, into the show. But after, seeing Who's There, episode 4, season 1, that's why I said like I need a spinoff. Like she is the most, I would say she's the most compelling character because that's what I love about good writing,
Yeah,
and MJ show running is that they give you these little details in dialogue, and you're like, well, hold on now, what's that about? There's a story there, and everything
yeah.
she saes has a story. I'm jumping all over the place in terms of her dialogue, but there's that really sweet moment. She says, that she gets to say goodbye to the people that she loves. And then you think about that, you're like, oh man, the life that she's lived, there's people that she loved that she just lost and never had that farewell. And so there's so
What and
much.
and what is it she say? Most poor sons of bitches don't get that chance, and
Exactly.
it's really true. And as and this is the thing. It sounds like I'm gonna be waxing MJ's onion here, but what he did by taking characters and turning them around and introducing so many dimensions. And I got to tell you, I play old ladies. That's, typecasting. But I rarely get to place an old lady who is sexually interested and interesting, who is reflective, who is as dimensional as Granny Dread from a video game. And what he did, what he took that little red lady in the corner of the screen and turned her into somebody that was incredibly complicated. And despite the way I played her, a very subtle, nuanced person who was experiencing with full cognition her life, her love, her sex, her death, her family, even that little dead dog next to her. I mean, what an accomplishment. And those roles don't turn up for, well, at least not for women my age, because our job is mostly to die in movies, to be honest, which I did in this one too, but never so spectacularly as I did in this. I mean, that the whole Viking funeral aspect of it was, I mean, that wasn't necessary. That was magic.
Yeah,
And
Dr.
then to
Mates.
erupt into a party, a genuine celebration. People talk about the celebration of life, and those are typically pretty dour fucking occasions when you get down to it. Not Granny Dreads. It was a celebration with life, and that's all MJ.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's such a pivotal episode in that first season. And if you don't like that one at that point, like why are you even watching it? Like
Yeah.
it's such a great character. And again, everything, all the storylines that center around her, the stuff between Miranda and Amber.
Yes.
It's such a great episode, and very, it's funny, it's silly, and also very heartwarming. I love it so much. And again, you get the sense of her from the dialogues, her interactions with John, with Quiet even,
Hmm.
and then the send off, and then you learn that she was a real estate agent. And you're like, wait, hold on now.
She was a badass real estate agent. That was the
Yeah,
thing. Her job might have changed, but her adjectives never did. Always a badass, I think.
bit of a cowgirl, I mean,
Yeah.
and my apologies if this word isn't use anymore. But she's like that old broad, that's just full of
Yeah,
life. And yeah, I love her so much. And I think what I was mentioning about our guest previously, he never expected to feel for a Granny Trend, and
I
she really
love
did make us
that.
feel. Wow.
I
It's
love that.
um
And by
be
the way, let me
yeah.
say too that we were all, I mean, the sets we were on shooting all of that stuff, they were like really the dimensions of the back of semis.
Yeah.
I mean, and so these were small, tight, and they were filled with people and activity and life and texture and depth and it was a real love thing. And I know you talked to Angel, who was a big spirit on that set too. And all of it was really good folks. I felt incredibly well supported doing the work I was invited to do.
I can't speak enough about episode 4. I think I even shared the sequence where the vehicles kind of transform and all that stuff. It's a really great episode that not a lot of people are talking enough about. It's my favorite community. You
Yeah.
mentioned Angel who plays Tinker. Um,
Hmm.
you guys have a DJ, you know,
Of
it's just
course. Is
parties.
it
All the characters. I mean, Miranda Watts, played by Jamie Newman. Oh my God, just
Jamie
another.
Newman is a miracle. She's just a miracle. And she was probably, I mean, I spent more time with her than anybody else on the set. And what a down to earth, loving person who she just turned it on. And, she was great.
The dynamic between the two. Even if they weren't, I might be if I missed a dialogue. It's I we have that's actually our next episode when we're gonna dissect the dialogues and the scenes.
Oh, good.
So I love that we get to speak to you before that, so we have a little bit more insight. Um, but I don't know if there's an actual familial relationship between Miranda and Granny, but you almost feel like there could be, and even if
Well,
they're
and
not.
in that world, and I think that's a theme in the show. I mean, that John and Quiet, and Quiet and her brother, all of these links, whether they're blood or preference or, just the circumstances where people land, you got to find your connections where you can. And there's no doubt, in my mind, well, I'll just share with you. I don't believe that she was my birth daughter, but she was my daughter. She was my heir. She was the person I trusted to carry the convoy and everything forward, to look after all these other people too. So yeah, no, there's no doubt that she was a daughter, if not a biological daughter.
This is my showing my naivete. Boca Raton, is that real or did
Oh
okay?
yeah, that's a city in
Okay.
South Florida.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I thought I was kind of getting like the geography mixed up, and I thought that she was mispronouncing Baton Rouge.
No, Boca Raton is a kind of got rocks community. I mean, a lot of people who've made their fortunes in Ohio and in New Jersey retire to Florida, but they want to live a high quality life, so they go to Boca.
Okay.
Boca Raton, I think, translates as the mouth of the rat.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
Because after
it's a
Miranda says
coastal
that,
city. Yeah.
it cuts to Loud and Quiet who are looking at each other. I'm sorry, Quiet and John who look at each other kind of puzzled. So I was like, okay, it's either they're puzzled because of the story or the mispronunciation of the city. So that's yeah. Um,
I think my guess is they're puzzled because who'd have thought that I was like a leading realist? I mean, particularly because I come out kind of guns, literally guns. My crutch is a rifle. I don't know if you can see it, but we had to do all
kind of
gun
quick.
etiquette because of the number of weapons on that set was crazy. But
Yeah.
but yeah, I think it's because I was like Annie Oakley, and then suddenly they realized, no, I'm a high tone. I mean, like a realtor to the stars. That's would have been what I was doing.
To
Yeah.
probably
I would,
your face on a billboard somewhere
oh,
out there.
easy, with a whole bevy of young blondes surrounding me, going like this. Teach us how to sell, Kathy. You know,
Yeah.
It's very is a real archetype, and at least in Florida, these these powerful female realtors with all the big teeth and everything, and they just stink of money.
Yeah.
They are very successful people.
One of my favorite exchanges is between Granny and John is when they were negotiating over the Missily things, the red Missily
Hmm.
things. And when the strike was going on, I actually clipped that and said, like basically wishing like the writers and actors, like, hey, good luck. Basically, bring the Granny Dread energy. But I love that whole thing. How many takes? Can you just talk about like filming that
It was a
that
quick
sequence?
shoot. I have to
Okay.
say, I um, we, it was not a lot, although I was so grateful. Um, we rehearsed.
Mm.
Sometimes you don't really get to rehearse, and particularly when you've got high star value on stage, they're very careful about that. But maybe it was because Anthony's just a great guy, and so is Stephanie, and that they come from theater traditions, so they value rehearsal. They understand. So we rehearse that, and that timing had to go really quickly.
Hmm.
And I think well, I say the four of us. I can't really speak for everybody else. There was a lot of theater training on that sound stage that day, and so people came in knowing what was going to be required. But we did it pretty quickly. When I did the spit handshake in rehearsal, I remember Anthony going because yeah, that I will take credit for. That one was mine.
Yeah. If you can add more, if I would imagine a lot of it is on paper, but were you guys given room to add any spins to what was on paper, especially Granny Dread, kind of shooting from the
I
hip a
was
little
pretty
bit.
much I was word for word. I have to say
Okay.
I could not there was nothing I could do to top that script. And by the way, the whole real estate thing, that was kind of a last minute that element of Granny Dread, the benediction at her desk when Miranda, is getting ready to send her onto the great beyond in the BMW. That was always there, but that I think was a pretty late addition, and I think that Jamie might have massaged that a little bit, but you know, I was not going to mess with those words. It's always my goal is to be word perfect, and carrying around a 65-year-old head, so sometimes I'm not quite as good as I might have used to have been. But I didn't improvise on the language at all. The timing now and then maybe a little bit, and uh, oh, Maggie Carey was the director of that episode, and she encouraged that. Does anybody want to do it again and things like that? So there was a lot of respect for and of course, again, Anthony Mackie, I mean, and Stephanie Beatrice, both of them are so skilled, and much more so than I would say, and I was so thrilled just to be able to work with them.
Yeah.
Jamie too. I mean, Jamie really delivers.
She really stands out as well. Like you're hanging on to every
Mhm.
word she has to say, at the moment to send off. So,
Well, she's such a
yeah,
badass, and
yeah,
she's so vulnerable at the same time. You can see she's a tiny person with a lot of magnetism. And the way her costumes worked and everything, you could see the sinews in her arms and things like that. She was just, I thought it was a perfect piece of casting, that
yeah.
badass vulnerability.
I think we need something where we can some sort of I don't know special features or whatever this to kind of give us more of the inside look on the makeup and the details in the makeup and the costuming
Yeah.
and props just because like things are moving so fast and it's there's a lot of action, you miss out on the details, and so um we need some.
I think the nature of this, particularly since it has all this mythology, and there's And it was always so funny in a Marvel world. They always say, that is canon. This is
Right.
canon, and there's canon here too. There's some serious obligations to not alienate the people who are the fans of the original world, to maybe deepen and broaden it, which I think is a pretty big requirement to place on somebody. And, MJ pulled it off.
Hmm.
Mm. Tyler, did you have anything? I just had just maybe a couple more questions as we get ready to wrap up.
I mean, I'm just always interested if there's anything you would want to recommend to people, like either like things you've enjoyed recently, movies, TV, anything that you'd like to point people to that you're
And
enjoying.
also, if you can add, because currently there's a lot going on your side of the country.
Oh
I
yeah.
don't know if there are certain funds that people could possibly donate to. I know like when the actors were on
Well,
strike, there was a fund to share as well.
yeah, where I live in North Georgia, I'm right below where North Carolina and Tennessee meet. I'm right below there. So even though I work in Atlanta as an actor, I'm literally closer to Asheville and Chattanooga than I am to Atlanta. So when that storm came through, it was supposed to hit us, and it went a little east and it hit Asheville instead. And so what's going on up there still, they're only now being able to get down I-40 and some of the roads. And Asheville, Florida knows it's going to get hit every year somewhere, somehow. And, the butt clenching that Floridians, and I'm one of them, have done our whole lives as we see those swirls start to develop in the Gulf. We all know what that's like. Asheville had no expectation of this, and they had no warning, and their infrastructure was not ready for it. So I'm going to talk about Florida in a second, but I think if anybody wants to look at what's going on up in Asheville, I always think World Kitchen is great, because it feeds people and stuff like that. But maybe look for some local charities in Asheville. I'm not a religious person, but I find that individual churches, are looking after individual people. They're still going up. They're taking mule packs up into the hills to find
Hmm.
people. And these aren't just hillbillies up there, even though hillbillies are people too. But I mean, these are folks who are vacationing from Wisconsin are still stuck up in the hills over Asheville. It's a really, but thank heavens for FEMA.
Mhm.
Thank heavens for the military. And I know that's your history as well, Peter. I'm so grateful that these forces are there and are pushing through. They're just really starting to peel out in Florida. What happened in Sarasota, where the storm came in, was really bad. We were lucky. I was in Winter Park because I'm directing a play at my alma mater there with some friends. And I drove down 500 miles on Saturday, and then I drove home 500 miles on Sunday because they evacuated the campus. But I think Florida's going to be okay. Although Floridians listening, trust me, I'm feeling your pain down in Sarasota and Siesta Key, and all of those areas there are pretty obliterated. Um, but they know, I have to say, Floridians know how to do a storm. Ashevilleans did not. And so um, I love you. I love them all, but I have to say my heart is aching for what's happened up there. So if people want to pay attention to that, I'd be thrilled. Something I'm watching, by the way, that I'm loving, 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 and this is everybody watches it. To me, it is a textbook in great acting. It's Gary Oldman and Slow Horses. And they just came out with season 4, and this is like a BBC production. Kristen Scott Thomas and Gary Oldman, and he is moi chef's kiss. And so I'm trying to watch that as slowly as possible to make it last as long as it can. I'm delighted by it. So I would say that's the stuff I'm kind of tuned in on.
And if we can end it with this, you've worn so many different hats, and you do so many different things. What advice could you give to somebody who is kind of maybe starting on that path and want to do so much? What can you advise them in terms of not overwhelming themselves in the work, in the different
What
hats to wear?
That's such a good question too. As a former student of mine was just reaching out with a similar question because she's having some moderate success in auditions, but she also has this huge burden of student loans, and she's a bright person who can get a real world job, and she's struggling between whether she is sacrificing her artistic life by trying to pay her bills. And I think that's a very common path for artists, actors of all kinds to recognize that you have to take care of yourself. I went on a rant on Facebook because that's the old person's social media, as you know. And just yesterday about the broad free floating anxiety that we're all living in right now with the election coming and with these storms coming and with people hating on each other at the supper table and you know and the algorithm is ripping our hearts apart and things like that, that to just take a moment. I live in the woods. Step outside, take a breath, check reality, and practice gratitude. I know that sounds like one problem, you know, generalization after another, but I think that's the most important thing is to try to be present with your opportunity right now, narrow it so that you can do it well and you can enjoy the delicious flavors that flow from it versus never having a chance to even consume it deeply because you're so scattered. Just be where you are, narrow, but always have a bag packed. You never know what tomorrow brings.